So let's talk about exhaust systems. Because most Harley Davidson people are obsessed with their exhausts. They have to have just the right sound, just the right aesthetic, or they're looking for performance. And the thing is, when choosing an exhaust, it's hard to get both, right? You've got opposite ends of the spectrum. The best sounding and most traditional exhaust systems are the worst performing of the bunch. Where you're best performing, they don't have that Harley, potato. So I want to talk about the 3 essential types of exhaust systems that you can put on one of these bikes and the pros and the cons of each. But before we can do that, we need to understand some basic universal laws as they apply to 4-stroke engine exhaust systems. So one of them is very simple and straightforward. Heat is the lubricant for exhaust. So when the exhaust pulse, when that pressure pulse leaves the cylinder head and heads down the pipe, it's looking for a hot environment. The hotter the pipe, the less of that pressure or the pulse is lost to the pipe, to the surface area of the pipe, or heating the pipe. So you want to keep the pipe as hot as possible, for as long of its run as possible. And that's why you see people use heat wrap on the exhaust. And the idea there is to keep the heat in the pipe so that the exhaust pulse stays hot, and as long as it stays hot, it stays fast. It's efficient. The other universal principle is a little controversial because it has to do with a myth that's been around literally, repeated millions of times during the entire history of the internal combustion engine. And that myth is that an engine needs some back pressure to run right. Okay? And this is exactly opposite wrong. An engine needs no back pressure. In fact, back pressure in any form is the enemy of efficiency or the enemy of power. So how did this myth come about? If you're not intimately familiar with the cycles of a 4-stroke engine, you don't know about certain dynamics that take place that could give you the impression that a little bit of back pressure will help the engine run. So if you've ever screwed around with engines and you fired one up without any type of exhaust on it, you'll see that it'll run, it'll sit there, it'll run, it'll pop out of the ports, it'll throw some fire out of it, you give it gas and you'll throw a little bit more fire. But if you try to operate it in that condition, it makes no power, okay? Now if you take an exhaust and you bolt it to the engine, all of a sudden it functions correctly, right? The motor will run out and it'll run strong. So if you're not familiar with, like I said, the cycles, how things are timed and sequenced inside the engine, you'll assume that it's the back pressure that you added from the exhaust that made it run right. But in reality, what you did was you created scavenging, because anytime you extend the exhaust past the port, past the valve, past the port, what you're doing is you're creating a low pressure area behind the pressure pulse. So when the exhaust valve opens and the exhaust is leaving the port, it's in the shape of, okay, for lack of, it's not a solid, obviously, it's a gas. It's a high speed, high temperature gas, but it's in the shape more or less of a ball or a teardrop. And it's moving at the speed of sound. So as it leaves the exhaust, as it leaves the cylinder head, as it leaves the port, and heads into a pipe or any type of collector, behind it is a low pressure area. All right, now the low pressure area is vacuum. So incorporated into the camshaft cycle of a 4-stroke engine is a period called overlap, where both the intake and the exhaust valves are open the same amount at the same time. And this happens at the top of the exhaust stroke. So the top of the compression stroke, the spark plug lights, both valves are closed, the chamber is sealed, and the pressure has no place to go except push the piston down. Now the piston gets to the bottom of its power stroke and starts its way up on the exhaust stroke. The exhaust valve is open and the exhaust is pushed out. As it nears the top, as the piston nears the top of the bore, the exhaust valve is closing, but it doesn't completely close. At the same time, the intake valve is beginning to open. So for that period of time, a couple of degrees, when the piston's at top dead center, both the intake and the exhaust valve are open. And that exhaust pulse creates a low pressure area that extends through the chamber to the intake side and initiates a pull of the intake mixture into the cylinder before the piston actually has a chance to start moving down on and pulling in the mixture on its own. So that period of overlap and that scavenging is super important to engine performance. Now that amount of overlap, how far the valves are open, how long they stay open, that all has to do with the camshaft profile. And a very high performance engine would have those valves open for several degrees of crankshaft rotation and very open. And a mild cam for, like, let's say, a very smooth running engine would only have them open a slight amount. But either way, the process is the same, or the idea behind it is the same, to initiate the pull of the intake charge into the combustion chamber using the escaping exhaust gases. All right, does that make sense? Now there's another way that a lack of back pressure could be construed as, bad for power. And that would be like when you take the mufflers or the baffles out of an exhaust system. So on a motorcycle exhaust system, the idea is, remember now, the exhaust pulse is coming out like in a ball shape. And it's filling the pipe completely. When it gets to the muffler or the baffle, the purpose of that muffler or baffle is to break up that ball. And when you break up the ball, you take some of that noise away, and that's how a muffler works. So by removing the mufflers or the baffles, you're increasing the engine's, or I should say the exhaust's, ability to pass those pressure pulses through. A lot more scavenging happens. And if you don't increase the amount of fuel going into the engine to match that air, to match the atmosphere that's coming through, then you'll be down on power. So again, it can be construed that you removed the back pressure and the engine didn't run right. It didn't run right because you didn't add more fuel. So that whole back pressure thing is an absolute myth. Anybody who comes to you and says, no, an engine needs back pressure to run, back away from them slowly, right? They're probably dangerous. Back pressure is the enemy of performance, always, under all circumstances. I know some of you people are thinking, well, what about things like funny cars and dragsters and top fuel motorcycles and stuff? They use open straight pipes. The exception to that rule of the scavenging is when the engine is supercharged. When an engine is supercharged, it's using the boost, it's using the pressure created by the supercharger to blow that mixture across. So it doesn't need the scavenging effect, and that's why those engines will run with open pipes and no collectors. All right, did I cover that? Yes, I did. All right, so the three basic types of exhaust systems you can fit to one of these things. The first would be drag pipes, which would be the most traditional looking and the most traditional sounding out of all. But there's no scavenging benefits to a drag pipe. There's somewhat of a scavenging benefit in that the longer the pipe, the more pulses are contained in the pipe and the stronger the pull behind it. But drag pipes are long. Most of them are long. The traditional drag pipes are long. The ones that give you that traditional Harley Davidson sound are very long, and they get cold towards the end. Remember, the colder the pipe, the more resistance there is to the pressure pulse. So a long drag pipe will create a bit of back pressure, or it won't flow as efficiently. But it'll give you the sound you want. Potato, potato, that's where it comes from. Now, if you're bent on a drag pipe type of setup, you're looking for performance, a mixture between performance. You're not going to get optimum performance out of drag pipes no matter what you do. But your best bet for performance and that look and sound would be a set of shorties. Like I've got this set of Van Hines short shots here. So these are good in that there isn't much wasted metal, or there isn't much wasted space as far as heat goes. Now, if you look at the pipes on this bike, you'll see that they're blued. They're actually severely blued. And I'll get into it in another video. I'll talk about the the distance and the degree of bluing you'll find on a pipe and what that means, but not now. So you see these pipes are blued almost to the end. Right about here the bluing stops. So at this point the pipe is cold and it's not going to want to transfer that exhaust pulse as efficiently as it will up here. So when you go with a short style drag pipe, you'll see it only extends a couple of inches beyond the heat zone on this pipe. So these will give you your most efficient drag pipe exhaust, and actually sound pretty good too. You'll get a good bark out of a short set. You won't get that super traditional Harley Davidson sound. It'll be a little more barky, but a short set of drag pipes is your best set of drag pipes. All right, so moving on. Next, you've got your balance pipe exhausts, like this one right here. So these balance pipes started showing up in the middle 1970s on certain models. By the 1980s, on the Sportsters, they all had this balance pipe, unless it was a 2-into-1 exhaust. If it was 2-into-1, and we're going to get into 2-in-1s in a second, they all had this balance pipe. And it stayed here until 2004 when I went to the rubber mount. So when I went to the rubber mount, they moved the balance pipe from here to down here between the mufflers. So if you look behind the mufflers on a rubber mount Sportster, you'll see a tube that connects to the front part of each muffler. And the idea behind that isn't so much for performance, but there is a performance benefit. And there's more of a performance benefit with these 2003 and older high-mounted balance pipes than you'll find with the lower ones. So the main reason why the engineers designed or incorporated these balance pipes is because with a stock quiet exhaust system, if you don't have a balance between the two, you get a poppy type of exhaust. It just doesn't sound right. When you put a balance pipe in there, you get more of a rumble. So it's really for an audio aesthetic reason, main reason that they put the balance pipes in these. But the balance pipe, this high-mounted balance pipe, also serves a secondary purpose. And it makes it probably the superior type of exhaust system in general that you can incorporate on one of these engines. So remember, the exhaust pulse is coming out of here at the speed of sound, the shape of a ball, hot mass, and it's creating a vacuum, a low pressure area behind itself. As that pressure pulse passes this balance tube, it stays pretty much intact, but it also creates a low pressure area in the balance tube. And that low pressure area extends across to the other cylinder, and it's actually creating a vacuum ahead of the pressure pulse, giving it an easier path out of the engine. So it's a minor bit of scavenging. And of course it's sharing back and forth. When this one fires, it creates a low pressure area that pulls everything this way and helps this one evacuate. So it's a minor effect on here. I mean, I would hazard to say under certain circumstances, at certain RPMs, and it could be one RPM range, or it could be a couple of different RPM range where things tune. Like sonic pulses on the intake will tune at 2 different RPM ranges. So you have a similar situation with the exhaust, and you can't really pinpoint where it's going to happen, but there would be a slight scavenging effect. It's probably worth a horsepower or 2. It's probably worth 2 or 3 pounds of torque. It's minimal, but it is there. Now you don't get that scavenging effect when you move the balance tube back here like they did on the lighter bikes, because by this point the exhaust has cooled off. There is no real scavenging effect happening back there. The exhaust is it's willy-nilly, and it's just trying to find its way out the pipe any way it can get there. It's not really working, but up here it is working, and so that's a benefit. Probably the best overall exhaust system you can put on one of these things for efficiency's sake is, efficiency meaning power also, is a balanced tube exhaust with a pair of slip-ons. Now on this particular bike, this is the system I'm going to use with this engine. I'm building another engine for it, but for this 1200 that's in here now, this is exactly how I'm going to run the bike. I'll probably end up creating some kind of heat shield over here to keep the front pipe from burning my foot, or the exhaust from the front pipe from burning my foot. But other than that, I'm going to leave it pretty much the way it is. Because judging by the heat marks on this pipe here, this is exactly the right length. So it's the lightest, most efficient system that I can have on here. When I build the good engine for this, which is going to be based on Buell internals, it'll have a 2-to-1. But for the time being, this is how I'm going to run this particular engine. So the best compromise for an exhaust system is going to be a balanced head pipe with a pair of slip-ons with the sound and the look of your choice. Now the third type is for performance, and it's going to give you the least Harley-like sound. They sound great, but it doesn't give you that, potato, 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 is the 2-to-1. Now, Harley-Davidson included 2-to-1 exhausts on these bikes going all the way back to like 1959, I think. No, actually the first one, 57, had a 2-to-1 with a high pipe like this. But it wasn't really tuned for scavenging or anything like that. It was just a simplified exhaust system. One muffler and one pipe on its way out. They didn't get into the real 2-to-1, the high science, until much later on. Now, with a 2-to-1 exhaust, I don't have one here handy to show you. The only one I've got is at home on one of my bikes at the house. But on a 2-to-1 exhaust system, the benefit there is the scavenging. So this is obviously this is a car header, but use your imagination and pretend 2 pipes are missing. So what happens here is the pressure pulse heads out of the cylinder head, down this tube, and enters the collector. And once it's in the collector, it's creating a low pressure area behind itself. That low pressure area is then pulling on the next tube. And so this exhaust, the exhaust coming out of this cylinder is getting sucked down. It has its own momentum, it has its own inertia, but it's also being pulled along by the pulse from the previous cylinder. So the collector length and the diameter are very important. The overall length of a 2-to-1 header is extremely important too. A true race or true high performance 2-to-1 header is going to be very short, and that's to minimize heat losses. Most of your street oriented, just regular rider oriented 2-to-1 exhausts are going to have the collector about mid-range in the bike, a little bit past midway in the bike, and they're going to have the muffler behind the passenger rider's head, right? So they want anybody who's sitting on the bike to not have to have this thing droning in their ear. A true high performance 2-to-1 is going to be very short, and the collector is going to be, the merge is going to be right about here, and the collector will end just past the rider's ear or thereabouts. Because again, heat losses, you want to keep everything as hot as possible, and the longer you make that pipe, the more surface area there is to the pipe, the more cooling effect by the air going around it is going to be, and the more losses, efficiency losses to the pressure pulse you're going to find. Okay, I think I covered. As always, as soon as I hit the off button, I'm going to remember a couple other things that I should have thrown in this video, but I'll save it for the next one. So those are your 3 basic types of exhaust systems: drag pipes, balanced pipes, and 2-to-1. And what you choose is going to depend on your need, your desires for that bike. If it's only sound, traditional sound, and traditional look you're looking for, then just old school drag pipes, long drag pipes will give you that. And in the opposite end of the spectrum, if all you want to do is all you're looking for is just gut ball power, a shorty 2-to-1 is the way to go. All right, so I hope you got something out of that, and go make noise. I'll see you tomorrow.